Welcome everyone to today's call, and I'm excited about this topic because questions relevant to this topic have come up on recent calls, and I think it's important to either review this if you're a patient of mine or to hear it for the first time if you're a layperson seeing this in one of my courses or some other content. And so allergies and risk of viral infection. This is very important, and research will clarify some things for us today. And I thought this graphic of Mona Lisa with a mask on, you see she's holding some toilet paper and some hand sanitizer. Even Mona Lisa's scared of COVID, and she's already dead, so I don't understand that. But let's dive in. So one of the things that we want to understand immunologically, and if you're a patient of mine, I've drawn the seesaw or the teeter-totter for you. And this, this is a balance metaphor over here, but just like a scale, the scale will tip just like a seesaw or a teeter-totter will if the weight on one side is higher than the weight on the other, right? And so just like we want balance in life, balance in our lifestyle, we want balance in our immune system and in our inflammatory status. Now, I made a video last Friday talking about immune boosting for support against coronavirus. And I talked in that video about how the goal is not to never be sick. We don't want to never be sick because then we're not using our immune system. The way to have a healthy immune system is to challenge it. And you want to challenge it with things, obviously, that are not lethal. And so that's where coronaviruses and flu viruses and herpes family viruses come in. These viruses are not lethal to the typical person. And so we don't want to run from them and hide behind masks and hide behind locked doors. We actually want to expose ourselves to them so that we can grow our immune muscles, so to speak. And just like we don't want to never be sick, we also don't want to have zero inflammation in our body. We want to have a physiologic level of inflammation. So an example that I talk about in my book, The Autoimmune Answer, is the physiologic inflammation that should be present at the gut barrier or the GI barrier. Now, physiologic inflammation is exactly what it sounds like. It's physiological, it's normal. It's that normal level of inflammation that helps the GI barrier determine friend from foe. It allows your GI barrier to tolerate the probiotics, but activate and react against pathogenic microbes. So it's that balancing act. And we want to see balance in our inflammatory status, in our immune system, in our blood sugar, in our hormones, in our lifestyle, and anything we're doing. It's not until we become imbalanced that we start to have problems. So we'll return to this. But I want to show you this study called Pollen Exposure Weakens Innate Defense Against Respiratory Viruses. And this was published in 2019. So this study was published before coronavirus hit the scene, but it just reinforces the importance of immune balance and reinforces the risk for people that are on the allergic side of things or are imbalanced in an allergic way. They have a higher risk of respiratory viruses. So SARS-CoV-2 or COVID, flu, rhinovirus, respiratory syncytial virus, all these different viruses are found more commonly in people that are pro-allergy, allergic to pollen, allergic to multiple different things. And this study dives into that. So I want to show you the abstract. And what the study was looking at was what they wanted to determine. Up here, you can see their objective was to assess whether pollen may interfere with antiviral immunity. Okay, so in times of the year when there's higher pollen, are people at greater risk of viral infection? And what the study found was yes. So essentially in the results down here, you can see, quote, pollen significantly diminished interferon lambda and pro-inflammatory chemokine responses of airway epithelia to rhinovirus and viral mimics. So in English, that means that pollen significantly decreased the antiviral portion of the immune system, or the antiviral portion specifically of the airway, to rhinovirus and other viruses. So if you're allergic to pollen in high pollen season, you're at higher risk of viral infection because the pollen is swinging your immune system to a phenotype that is opposite of the antiviral response. And the allergic response dampens your antiviral defenses. But check this out. It's not just allergic people. They also looked at non-allergic people, so people without allergies. And in non-allergic human volunteers, nasal symptoms were positively correlated with airborne birch pollen abundance. And nasal birch pollen challenge led to downregulation of type 1 and 3 interferons in the nasal mucosa. So again, you don't have to be allergic to pollen for pollen to impact you. And the high pollen time of the year, say springtime, specifically in this study, they were looking at birch pollen, but they found that even in people who weren't allergic to pollen, there were much more nasal symptoms during that time of year. And the greater the symptoms, the higher the correlation with the birch pollen abundance. So we know it was the birch pollen causing it. And the birch pollen challenge led to downregulation of the antiviral defenses in the sinuses. And so this led to increased cases of rhinovirus. So rhinovirus cases were correlated with airborne birch pollen concentrations, which makes sense, right? The higher the birch pollen, the more rhinovirus cases. The higher the birch pollen, the more suppressed your antiviral defenses, the more rhinovirus cases. So in conclusion, the author said the ability of pollen to suppress innate antiviral immunity independent of allergy suggests that high-risk population groups should avoid excessive outdoor activities when pollen and respiratory virus seasons coincide. I don't necessarily think you need to, stay inside, maybe for the couple days where the pollen's very high, but the main take home for us is that the pollen suppresses the antiviral immunity independent of allergy, meaning it happens in people who are allergic, but it also happens in people who are not allergic. And this is how. So if you're a patient in my practice, you've seen me draw this out for you. And what this is a seesaw or a teeter-totter, right? And just like in the balances from Lady Justice, just like we want to see balance there, we want to have immune phenotype balance in a resting state. Okay, it is appropriate if you're allergic or if you're infected with a parasite or yeast to have an increase in Th2 response, because that's the part of the immune system that deals with allergy or kills parasites and yeast. But you must know that in order for that response to ramp up and do its job, it inhibits the Th1 response, which is the antiviral response, the intracellular infection response. Okay, so it's appropriate if you're responding appropriately, you deal with the situation and then the inflammation comes back to balance. But it's inappropriate if you're triggered by pollen, you get an allergic response, but it's too exuberant, or it continues to go on even when pollen is gone, right? Or when the parasite or yeast has been cleared, if you stay in a Th2 dominance, that's bad. That drives allergy, eczema, asthma, sinus issues, UTIs, okay, and can lead to autoimmune disease as well if it stays chronic. And again, if it stays in Th2, it's suppressing Th1. So say pollen season's over, but your immune phenotype is imbalanced, or your seesaw is imbalanced with the Th2 dominance. Now you enter, say, flu season, if there is such a thing, and you're entering that season with a suppressed antiviral defense. Now you're at greater risk of contracting the flu or COVID or rhinovirus or whichever one we're talking about. So we want immune balance, and we want to enter pollen season from a balanced situation, or we want to enter flu season from a balanced situation. And that way we have the highest probability of coming through unscathed. Okay. If you are entering the season imbalanced and now pollen further drives you up Th2, you're at higher risk of not only the viral infection, but also whatever allergic type symptoms you've already had. And we spoke last week about asthma isn't an autoimmune disease by definition, but asthma is a Th2 dominance disease. And if you get stuck in Th2 dominance for too long, that can promote autoimmune disease and start that snowball downhill. So a quick one today, but I think very relevant in the context of COVID, to know that if you are someone who has allergies, you're someone that uses Claritin and Nasacort and those sorts of things all the time, or you have an inhaler that you're always using, those are Th2 dominance diseases, which suppress your antiviral defenses and create an imbalanced seesaw and promote viral infection. So you want to work with a practitioner that can understand your immune phenotype, can help you restore it to balance, and at the same time reduce your allergy symptoms and improve your antiviral defenses. And functional medicine practitioners do that all the time. So that's the paradigm you want to pursue versus going to an ENT and getting more, Claritin, Nasacort, inhaler, etc. An interesting study has shown that the inhaler for asthma specifically, even though it is a rescue inhaler, right? It's a corticosteroid. So an inhaler has corticosteroids in it. If you're having an acute asthma attack, it'll save your life. But studies have shown that if you're using it every day as a routine and you don't need it as a rescue, well, cortisol promotes Th2, right? So if you're in a routine of inhaling cortisol every single day, you're promoting that Th2 response, the same response that is driving the asthma, and you can be hardwiring your immune phenotype imbalance. So we don't want to take an inhaler just because we have it in our pocket. You want to save it as a rescue, not use it as a daily routine. And of course, speak with your primary physician before making any changes to any prescriptions, but have that conversation. Hey doc, do I really need this every single day, or should I save it for when I really need it?